Community development is quite broad. Within our office, there's basically 4 divisions. We have planning division, which handles both the current and long-range planning. Current planning is those things, such as current applications that are in for things such as subdivisions or rezoning or that sort of thing. Also, there's a long-range aspect to planning, and that deals with your longer-term plans, such as the city's comprehensive plan, which is kind of a 20-year vision, park and recreation planning, things of that sort. So that's the first division. Second division is basically building inspections, where we go out and actually inspect new construction, review projects for permit compliance with the international building codes, international fire code, which is handled through the fire marshal's office. The third division is community development, and community development is done through the Shawnee Urban Renewal Authority, and there's 3 staff members there that take in the federal funding that we get for community development block grants and spend those funds and allocate that. And those resources are spent for things like low interest loans. Individuals have to qualify and be of low income. They have to own their home. There's some various grant and different assistance programs there. And finally, we get more to our nuisance code enforcement division, which handles things like junk, trash, and debris, tall grass and weeds, dilapidated structures, things that deal with health, safety, life aspects of property. I think to a certain extent Shawnee has a number of the provisions that Norman has in place. What Norman has that Shawnee doesn't have is really a larger staff. We have a similar process. Many of our processes are derived directly from state law, and so we have to obviously be compliant with state provisions related to code abatement and nuisance code enforcement. What Norman's been able to do very effectively is to staff up and be able to be proactive in regards to their code enforcement. We currently have one individual whose full-time responsibility is nuisance code enforcement, and under that scenario, you're just not able to be proactive. He simply is so busy reviewing current calls that he gets every single day and emails from our complaint line that we're just really not able to go out there proactively and view complaint issues and take enforcement action unless they're brought to our attention. We do have some funding that we're hoping that's in the current budget that we can reallocate to hopefully be able to provide additional funding to hire one additional nuisance code enforcement officer. We're hoping to have that in place and to be able to post that position by the end of the year and hopefully be able to get somebody in here around January of 2009. I think 2 people probably is sufficient at this time. We're certainly going to have to reevaluate that as we're able to implement a more proactive system. Norman is obviously considerably larger. They have about 109,000 people, I believe. So you're looking at a community about over 3 times the size of Shawnee. I believe they have between 5 and 7 on their staff, and so we're going to have to reevaluate that after we get an additional person in here and kind of see how our complaint load is. These individuals would go out there, they would take the complaint, they would investigate the complaint, and then follow up with any corrective action. Sometimes the complaint is not valid, and in which case we certainly are willing and able to follow up with the complainant and provide them an update. Oftentimes the complaint is valid, and so we have a series of steps that we have to go through to notify the property owner, to make contact. We try to work with individuals and gain compliance without a heavy-handed approach. However, sometimes you can't do that, and you do need to take a firmer stand. It is somewhat seasonal. Certainly, tall grass and weeds are our largest complaint, and that obviously peaks during the growing season. And midsummer tends to be the peak time. We've noticed that that's been trailing down a little bit lately, and then obviously it will slow down quite a bit in the winter. And so that is seasonally affected. Overall, we're running about 1,500 complaints a year. And so if you average that out, you're looking at about 125 complaints or so a month. And it does tend to run seasonally. It's my understanding that funding has been severely reduced over the last few years. I think they operate now with a budget of around $400,000. And so that funding has been reduced, and it really just kind of ebbs and flows with the overall government priorities. And obviously with the new administration coming in, we'll have to see what's going to occur. I don't think it would necessarily result in anything visible compared to the status quo, compared to what we're facing today. The current funding numbers have been that way for several years, and so I think they're hoping to at least maintain the current level of service. I think in terms of the next decade, what are some of the challenges for Shawnee? I think it's going to be interesting to see how downtown continues to evolve and redevelop. I think if you look nationally and even within the state, there are trends illustrating a preference for people to move back to the city. We have a nice downtown core here, and I think we can grow on that and perhaps increase options downtown, both commercial and enterprise options, as well as possibly residential and housing options. I think other challenges are, of course, infrastructure related, water, roads, etc., utilities. We've got to have the infrastructure necessary to grow, and as we look at a 20-year time frame and increasing the population of the city, we obviously have to make sure that the basic infrastructure is in place to handle that. A lot of that discussion occurred after I came. I've been here for about 3 months now. The city had adopted a new ordinance, I believe it was in either June or July of this year, and so I am aware of that controversy. We do have a new ordinance in place. So far, we've had compliance. There is a process individuals can go through if they want to appeal a decision and go through a variance procedure if they feel like a sidewalk isn't warranted on their particular side of their particular location. And so far, the new ordinance seems to be effective. It can be both. The way the city's ordinance is established and the zoning code is established is that an individual or the city can come forward with a rezone proposal. Oftentimes, if you want to pre-plan for an area, and so say we have property that's set aside for commercial development or industrial development, when an individual or a corporation is looking to possibly relocate, one of the questions they're going to have is this zoned appropriately? In a lot of cases, I think a lot of the larger land parcels that we have out there are probably still zoned agricultural. And so, for instance, the city could take a stand in cooperation with Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development to look at some of those properties and set forth a more proactive rezoning initiative where we go in and rezone those appropriately at this time, so that when corporations or companies are looking to relocate, they don't have to spend 60 or 90 days to go through that rezoning process. I think that's one way that we can help. Now, for smaller properties and for more isolated incidences, it's going to be primarily a citizen-driven process. And so the comprehensive plan lays out a future land use map and a kind of a preferred future in relation to land use and zoning for the city. Oftentimes, those properties are not zoned that way currently. So, for example, there might be a commercial corridor that's listed as commercial in the comprehensive plan, but there might be several residences in a particular area, and so it's still zoned residential. And so in time, as property changes hands or as redevelopment occurs, then those property owners will come in, get the property rezoned, and then be in compliance with the comprehensive plan and be able to move forward with development.